My name is Allison Grealis. I am the president and founder of the National Association of Women in Manufacturing. We're the only national trade association year-round working to support, promote, and inspire outstanding women in manufacturing and leading women who are tackling tough things like innovation, technology, and how to solve lots of workforce issues. Today's panel that we are hosting is the future of the enterprise ecosystem, and we have an amazing group, quite a large group, of panel experts who are going to share their expertise in this area. Rather than me introduce all of them, why not have them introduce themselves? So we'll start with we'll start from Susanne to the far of my right, and then we'll work our way around. Each of our panelists will introduce themselves, their name, their title, their company, and where they're located, and then we will hop into questions. Given the constraints of our panel time today, I don't think we'll have time to field questions from the audience, but we highly encourage you to find any of us during the social hour or dinner tonight, and we can exchange more information as you see fit or where you have interest. So Susanne, why don't we start with you, if you can introduce yourself, and then we'll work our way through the rest of the panel.
Yeah, my name is Susanne Lauda. I work for AGCO Corporation. AGCO Corporation is a manufacturer of farming equipment. My job is Director of Global Advanced Manufacturing Technology. And in my spare time, in one of my spare times, I'm also on the board of directors for a national organization called Women in Manufacturing, which is run by Allison.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Gonzalez, and I work for Google Cloud. I am the director of PDM and PLM for all the, the data center products for our cloud business. And I am very excited to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I came from Turkey. Long trip from Los Angeles, Istanbul to Los Angeles, one of the longest to join you here. My name is Semiha Yasar. I am engineer. I worked for defense for years, for a decade, and now I am the IPX partner in Turkey.
So y'all know me. I'm Cassandra, obviously a keynote presenter. My firm is We Are Change Enthusiast LLC. I do have other offerings besides keynotes. My firm also does workshops as well as in-depth engagements. So if you're going through really acute change like M&A, that's kind of my bread and butter, then the firm will work with you for the next 3 to 6 months and coach you during that whole change event.
Hi, I'm Lee Ringgold. I work for Facebook in infrastructure, PLM, so product lifecycle management, headquartered in Menlo Park, just south of San Francisco, California.
Hi, I'm Jeanne Rues. I'm out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I work for Allison Transmission. I am the managing director of engineering services, and come up and ask me what that empire is, and I'll explain it to you later.
Hi, Erika Klein again from Microsoft. I'm part of the Azure organization, and I'm the director of PDM in the hardware engineering organization.
So lots of great knowledge on this panel, and I'm excited to hear from them. So we're going to start with some questions that we think would be of interest to all of you. The first is on the topic of company adaptation and change. So we're going to start with Erika and ask, what is your organization and company doing to assess and understand the processes and workforce development needs required for business growth and continual improvement? That's a lot.
That is a lot. I had to read the question like 3 times before I think about that. So I would say from an Azure perspective at Microsoft, we're just scratching the surface. We've got our PLM system in place, but now it's taking a look and saying, how do we, we've gone so fast, so quickly to deal with the capacity crisis that we had that I talked about earlier. Now it's really about how do we optimize, how do we drive efficiencies, how do we start looking end-to-end at the whole product life cycle and making sure that we have connection points back into, from like, telemetry data in the data centers all the way back into our designs and having that closed loop happening. So that's.
So Claudia, what about your company? What are you folks doing as it relates to how your organization is assessing and understanding the processes and workforce development needs required for business growth and change?
Yeah, sure. So at Google, process improvement is super key and priority. So we have a dedicated group that's all what they do for a living. It's business process architecture, and belong to a group also that drives all the PMO for major strategic initiatives. But in addition to that, I will say that every functional group, like in my group, in PDM, PLM, I have dedicated resources, not only for running the business, but for improving the business. And that's priority, basically.
So when you talk about that segregation, what are the different things that the improvement group is looking at versus the other group or segment?
So the improvement group focuses on transformations that are cross-functional, right? And sometimes it might go beyond cloud, right? And other groups within cloud. The functional groups individually focus more on their piece, right?
And then I think we also had, Susanne, are you weighing in on this as well?
Yes, so at AGCO we have something in place that's called APS, AGCO Production System, and that is a global system that is run out of our Duluth, Georgia headquarters and very strongly supported by our Senior Vice President, Manufacturing and Supply Chain. And at most of our locations we have an APS representative. So from a manufacturing process perspective, it is very well covered. It's focusing on lean, mainly on lean, and then in another team that's working also closely with our Senior Vice President Manufacturing, we identify technologies that we can match up with that lean journey that we are on. And last but not least, it's also, we talked about workforce. So in HR, we have our very specific business partners for manufacturing and supply chain that help us finding the right candidates that we need to be successful in that journey.
So when you talk about workforce needs, obviously there's lots of openings at companies, whether they be manufacturers or alternative technology companies and businesses. So as you look at the lean journey that most of your companies are participating in, Susanne, you talk about workforce and recruitment, are there different ways that your companies are recruiting or finding talent, or is it more partnership within different functional areas of the company?
So from our perspective, let's put it like that. We go several ways as far as that is concerned, because it is very, very hard to find the workforce today that you need. So one way is obviously to work closely together with universities and colleges and make sure that you engage with young talent at an early stage. Another possibility is, of course, to engage with organizations such as Women in Manufacturing or other organizations that are more focused on females, to make sure that we don't miss out on the female talent pool, because with those new technologies you don't need a lot of people with muscle power, you need people with brain power. And so that's why we want to make sure that we really cover all our bases here.
Yeah, like so that's similar at Allison Transmission. We have a very robust intern and co-op program that has really become a very strong feeder organization for us, as we have to bring in new talent, and we are constantly looking for new talent. What we've seen is the silver tsunami, of course, everybody's talked about that, and the changeover in our demographics has been huge, and we struggle so much to find ways to keep supplying the talent that we need, and that's just a huge thing, because you don't find the talent just out there ready to go, especially in the job environment that is there. People like their jobs and are staying for the most part. So we're relying heavily on our college interns, and we're lucky because we've got in Central Indiana a really great group of technical schools with Purdue and Rose-Hulman and even IU and IUPUI, Indiana University, Purdue University. And we pull heavily on those, and we're even constantly expanding our radius of where we're going to pull from too.
Right. And I like that sentiment of that it really is brains versus brawn. And it's a different type of workforce and individuals that we're looking to populate both manufacturing and lots of different areas present day. So the second area that we wanted to hop into is an exploration into methods. So what are those methods that are being utilized by your companies and you potentially individually as a leader to encourage the participation of your workforce in the business change needed to stay competitive? So I think we had a few groups of you. I think it was Semiha who was going to talk about this first.
Actually, my company is a small company now because I am the partner of IPX in Turkey. But with my past experience, as I used to work as an executive for the defense companies, and what we discussed today, everything was the issues. We discussed about the people, processes, and tools, and we discussed about the return on investment. If we invest for the processes, we will see the results in time. If we invest for the tools, we have to invest a lot of money. But if we invest to the people, we can see the result very easily. How we can do that? The methods are similar everywhere. We have to coach them. We have to develop them. We have to educate them. We have to give them the delegation. And to motivate them, we have to empower them. Without the empowerment, they cannot feel the part of the processes and part of the improvement. And the leadership is critical here, and I am following IPX here. IPX is growing very fast, and I can see what they do today. I like to thank Ray here. Actually, they do all. Even they develop us as the partners with these methods. They are giving us coaching, they are educating us, and they are giving us the leadership in our area that we can help other people with these methods. It is not only in our company, we look at the ecosystem and the environment, how we can introduce these methods and this approach to the companies that we are supporting. And we are showing them that this is the easiest way to see the return on investment. Thank you.
It sounds like some great tools in place from IPX as kind of base methodology and framework that can be used by many companies. So I think as well, Lee, you were going to weigh in and talk a little bit about companies that are your company and the methods that are being utilized to encourage the participation of your workforce and the business change needed to stay competitive.
So at Facebook, we have a lot of diverse products, and we're the user of our product, other than our connectivity, which is a technology transfer out. So with our servers, racks, even our data centers that are designed and built, we manage all of this, and we're empowered to be able to be really innovative, whether it's with process, cross-functionally, or whether it's with product. So one example is a few years ago when we developed a top-of-rack switch for our data center racks because we needed a technology that wasn't available to us. So that engineering function can happen. Same thing with processes. If, what was it, a year and a half ago, our facilities operations, because we design, build, and maintain our own data centers, they were basically pretty darn manual. And it's construction. It's a completely different space for a lot of people at Facebook. And they were running what made sense at the time, but very, manual processes, repeated processes by data center. They were very specific, and which ended up being duplicate part numbers, going only by vendors, not manufacturers, but it made sense to them at the time. But then they got a new tool, and we had to start controlling spares. So cross-functionally came together, worked on that, and it's taken a lot of cleanup that the initiators didn't count on. The program managers didn't understand that they had this massive cleanup to do in order to run a tool. But with everybody coming together and being innovative with processes, it came through.
Anyone else have anything to share on that in terms of certain methods that have been used or implemented? So how can companies embrace modern processes enabled by technology to improve the quality of service and to increase overall productivity? I think, Jeanne, you were going to weigh in on this one.
Sure, yeah. So I think this is a fun one because as I'm working in our business and we are exploring how we embrace modern processes. Allison transmission turned 100 years old a couple years ago. And so we're very proud of our history and our heritage. And, that comes with its baggage too. And so what we find is that the things that made us very successful 20, 30, 40 years ago have taken on this life in the business that's the way we do things. That's how we become successful and how we're at the top of our game, and we're just going to keep doing that to the point where the generations have turned over and people no longer remember why it was the way we did it that way. And so a key thing that we have in our business is to try to challenge the thinking around why we do things. And it's really easy for people in my organization and all of Allison Transmission to say, well, that's just the way we do it. Yeah, okay. But I challenge that every time with, okay, well, why do we do it that way? What value is it bringing? How is that differentiating us? How is that making us more efficient and effective? And how does that reflect the world today? A specific example, I was talking with Wayne from Sub-Zero at lunch about this. We have a process of putting our suppliers' names on prints because back in the day, purchasing used to go off and change suppliers without letting engineering know. Well, you know, since then, technology has changed, and we now have a disciplined workflow process through our digitalized PLM system that doesn't allow changes to happen without cross-functional interaction of every aspect of the business. We no longer need that process, but we are holding on to it like it is our lifeblood. You know, and so I just think about how much that causes and costs us in the business. And so I think, you know, how do we embrace modern processes? Well, first of all, I think it starts with that challenging, why are we doing the things that we're doing? And, you know, first of all, I would also say this, it's not the working people that are stuck on these processes. It isn't at all that working level engineer who is out there doing this job or the buyer in purchasing. It is their management that is stuck on the processes. And so the working bees are eager to change. They want to change. They're like, I can do all this stuff on my phone, but I come to work and I'm still using triplicate paper copies. What the heck, right? And so that's just a place where they're ready to change. They want to change. They see it in their lives. And what happens is that layer of management, the middle layer of management, even if you've got the CEO on board, that middle layer of management can be the barrier. And if they don't buy in, the worker bees are just going to keep going because that's what their boss says that they need to do. So.
I just want to add, so what you said really resonated. I'm doing some work right now with Allstate, and they're going through totally transforming the way they do initiative delivery and initiative management. And there are those in the organization that are so stuck to the way they had been doing it, and they're using that same strategy of questioning, what is the value of that way of doing things versus the value of this new way? And let's just talk about pros and cons. And so they're having to have very candid conversations about this is the value that this offers, and let's talk about how we get on board with that. So really
I think it would be interesting to know. It would be interesting to know how often they can get an answer to that question about why do you do it that way?
Yes.
Because I am often met with stunned silence. Well, I don't really know. That's just the way we've always done it. Okay, good, let's try something new, right?
You have passion behind.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I guess to that point, and this isn't something scripted, but just throwing out to the group, so we know leaders are critical to move this change forward, to have companies adapt technology, to change processes, to kind of throw to the wind, this is how we've always done it. So what approach have you folks used as leaders in your organizations to show that kind of disrupting all of these old processes, how it does improve customer service, how it improves your productivity and your profitability as a company? Is it getting micro groups of your leadership team together to present to higher leadership or to ownership about change in process? Is it looking at case studies or taking just one function or one process to start with and then using that as an example? What have been successful tactics in your individual companies?
Yeah, so I guess I can continue since I started us off on this. So I think it's all of those things. I mean, there's no, maybe we will come to some type of formula that works and is the go-to, we're going to do it this way at this time. But, you know, as Cassandra talked this morning about how everybody wears change differently, it changes. from the situation, from the culture, from the leaders, from what mental state they're in that day, about what's going to resonate with them. And so it's not a formula. It's not a recipe for change. It's guerrilla warfare and being ready to react to what's coming at you in terms of a leader, and trying to guide people through this wilderness of change that they don't understand, and they're having to let go of things that they've held dear, that are part of their, almost part of their value system. And so I leave no tool behind when it comes to this thing. And in fact, I'm anxious to learn more. That's one of the things I like about coming to conferences like this, is the ability to talk and network with other people and really learn what are other people doing, what's been successful. We heard in one of the presentations this morning about newsletters and sessions and training and online training and all this stuff, and it was like, yep, that's it, the shotgun approach to change right there. So we don't get all snooty about our methods. We'll use whatever works.
If I could just offer one other point, I feel like we're playing ping pong. But so with Allstate, as well as with a lot of my other clients, a lot of times people are not necessarily reacting to the change itself. They're responding to the discomfort that they feel. I don't feel comfortable. I've known something for so long. This is my lane. This is what I like. Change, I don't care what it looks like. I feel uncomfortable. So that's what they're reacting to in a lot of cases, which is oftentimes why they can't answer that question of why. It's just because, well, it doesn't feel good to go. So it's so important that when you give people the opportunity to recognize that and you speak to that discomfort, okay, I know you're uncomfortable with this change. Let's talk about the reasons why you have that discomfort, and really address that and give them the opportunity to emote and share those emotions. And that can kind of open the path to talk about, okay, discomfort, and then talk about maybe what the change might look like. But a lot of times people are reacting to that feeling.
Well, yeah, but you then have to be in an environment where people are comfortable with that emotional part of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
look, I'm an engineer's engineer. There's no emotion at work. Are you kidding me? There's no room for emotion. We deal with logic and facts. But then I recently had a mentor say to me, Jeanne, do you work with humans? And I had to admit that, yes, I do. And then, his point back to me was, well, then there's emotion involved. And so now it's about, even for me, how do I create that space where it's okay to have that emotional acknowledgement, even for me personally, that's then gonna leverage that so that I can get comfortable with what I have to face, right? And then how do you create that space for the engineer's engineer that you've worked with for 10 years who doesn't have that same thing too, right? It's kind of the pay it forward a little bit, but yeah, I mean, whew.
If I could just add a quickie, that it really, in Allstate being an example in yours, you have a big challenge because you have such historical thoughts of fear at that company. And I guess the difference is with Facebook that where you really sound tops down versus bottoms up. But our culture is why I love it there so much. We're really transparent. We talk, feedback is huge. But being that you're not created like that, and you were created a long time ago, going to places like this is great. But you may want to bring somebody like Cassandra and shake that place up. But something that shows new ways of doing things.
Yeah, I think it's been, just a second, Erika, I think it's been interesting. You make up a good point there about having this weight of the history of our company, but yet there is really, there's hope for us because there is a dynamic there. I mean, we recognize in the company, probably in a way that we didn't even 3 years ago, that we have to change in order to remain relevant and have a second 100 years. And that is a big motivator. Yeah. Plus, as some of our more experienced workforce is leaving us, we're getting a lot younger, and that's also helping accelerate that. But you're right, we're going to struggle, and we've engaged some outside help, but
I'll give you my card.
Yeah, I got it. Don't worry.
And I think you also have to identify the quick wins. So we have worldwide probably roughly 50 locations. Some of them are more change resistant than others. And so if you really want to introduce new technology and new processes, it's quite helpful to start with the sites that are already ready, that are embracing it because they understand it is needed to stay competitive, and then make these sites competitive, and so competitive that the other sites that were refusing change in the end just want it because they understand they are left behind in the dust if they do not adopt to these new processes and tools.
I think great. And Claudia, I think you were going to weigh in on this.
Yeah, sure, I can answer as well. So at Google, we have the opposite problem, right? Everybody wants to change, and change is a constant every day. So it's more of managing that change and making sure somebody has the overall vision. So there are two things that Google does really well. One is we have annual and then quarterly objectives and KPIs that come all the way from the top all the way down. So we are all marching towards the same goals, basically, across all the functions. And then the second one is we have this system of what we call enhancements. So anybody, so I own PLM, PDM. My group is focused on improving the PDM, PLM space. But also we can get ideas from anybody. Any of the stakeholders can put a request to change something on the process, on the data, on the system, on the roles, whatever they think is important and needed. So we have to take all those and act on those immediately. So that's also a very good way of channeling all that change.
I'd like to add something here, actually. In the past, we are baby boomers. If our management, top management, for asking for something, we were just doing it. We were not questioning. And if they asked for the change, we were doing the change. But at the millennium, after the millennium, we have to convince people to make the change. This is critical.
They're asking the why.
Yeah, this is why. They are asking for why. Because this generation is our kids. They are coming because we teach them to ask questions. And if they are not convinced, they are not going to do it. This is the challenge for us. We have to explain them what we are doing, why we are doing, and how we are going to do, how we are going to be successful.
But that also makes them great candidates to fill many of these technology positions and to be change advocates and ambassadors if they're already wired to ask why are we doing this, what is the impact. Yes. I think they can be great people on functional teams or investigatory teams on how your companies tackle business and how to change that process to something different. And they won't have that resistance that eons ago of individuals that are journeymen into many companies might have. So I think they could be great allies. So we're next going to hop into a similar related topic, but how can we identify the digital technologies that are best supporting your company's transformation roadmap? So how did your company choose which are these best technologies to use and to deploy as your company's digitally transforming? And what was that process like for your companies? And I think we've got, let's see, Susanne, you're one of the folks who are going to weigh in.
Yeah, so two things. First of all, we identified our core systems that are needed to build what some people call the digital thread, but we learned this morning that it is not a digital thread, it's actually a digital landscape. So it's very important to stay true to those systems, identify them, and then stay true to the systems that build that backbone. And as far as technology is concerned, I mean, there's a lot out there, and some of you that know AGCO or know me are very familiar with the use of Google Glass on the shop floor. So that was actually a lean project. So before we introduced Google Glass for work instructions and for inspection procedures, we had paper, we had stationary monitors, we had handhelds, we had a lot, but as you can imagine, people climbing up and down big tractors or big combines with paperwork or with a handheld or having to run back down to a stationary screen mounted next to the station, that's, from a lean perspective, a catastrophe, right? So out of this lean project, we created the use of Google Glass on the shop floor. So that's just an example. And all the other technologies that we are introducing, for instance, the cobot, which is a collaborative robot, is also driven by return of invest. Of course, there's a lot of cool stuff out there, but it doesn't come for free. So we always look at our processes and at our particular needs, and then we identify what could help us improving that situation and making us more productive. And then in the end, we put it together and create a roadmap and say, okay, this has to come first because before this can be introduced. So that's how we manage this.
Okay, I think Semiha, you were going to talk about this as well, correct?
Actually, I like to add something that for the companies who are talking about digitalization, they need to define the meaning of the digitalization for them. Every company has different products, different concepts, different processes, and it is a huge subject. It is like a fashion. In Turkey, everybody is talking about the digitalization. We are dealing with the Industry 4.0. We will have our processes all digitalized. I say, how we are going to do it, what we are going to do it. And they should define the metrics. And for example, in banking in Turkey, I can follow that they are using very good metrics, and because they see the return on investment, and with the existing metrics, they say the average is 97%. How they measure it? But for the manufacturing, the digitalization average in Turkey is about 20 plus, not 30. It means we have way to go, and everybody, for each company should define their needs for digitalization. This is, somehow they need to work with the processes and they need to work with the tools. Without the process and the tools, it's not easy to do that. And with like AGCO, we are following them, how they are doing the digitalization. They do it mainly in the manufacturing process, but for the engineering companies, like the defense companies in Turkey, they have to do the digitalization in the design process. Still, there is a big gap. Then they have to define, they have to work on the processes first, then the tools. This is what I can say.
So we're nearing the end of our time, and I want to make sure we give you all of you some additional practical takeaways before you leave the session. So I'm going to go through with each of the panelists. We'll start with Erika, and have each of them share one practical takeaway that they would like to share with you, impart with you, that would help drive that they believe would help drive sustainable change management initiatives in your companies. So Erika, we'll start with you with your a wise word of wisdom.
Okay, real quick. Well, I already shared a bunch of lessons learned this morning, so please take those away. But additionally, I would highly recommend defining a strategy for where it is you want to go, figuring out what those tactical steps are that you need to take to achieve that strategy. Start marching to that and define some OKRs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with OKRs, but they're objectives and key results. It's a good way to measure and be able to track that you're on course and headed in the right direction. And so I highly recommend going down that road so you can keep pace on things. Okay, Jeanne?
Sure. I agree with everything that Erika showed this morning and what she just said. And but I will add to that I think having the vision and an organization that can grab onto a vision is important, but that can be really hard. We're really at the beginning of our journey in terms of PLM transformation. We did one in the past and it was a disaster. And so we're having to figure out how to do it better this time. And so, you know, we don't exactly know where we're going to go, but we've gotten a team together and we have been able to articulate some guiding principles. You know, it's not important to know that, you know, it's important to know where you start. And we're in Indianapolis, so I'll use a map analogy here. Indianapolis, and we know that we want to go west. We don't necessarily have to know right now, or can we know right now that we're going to end up in San Diego or Las Vegas or Sacramento or Seattle? We don't know. And that's okay. And so besides having that vision and these guideposts to follow, to me, the practical advice is to establish that it's okay not to know exactly where you're going to end up, that you just have to know you're going west. And what does it mean to go west? So that you can have this set of criteria, and we have this set of criteria by which we're going to make our trade-offs. And that's going to lead us to where we're going to end up. And so it's simple things. It is 6 things. You know, it's accessibility of data has to be paramount. Traceability of information. We have to have gold sources and 3 others that I won't bore you with. But, you know, those guiding principles are key, because now we don't have to know exactly where we're going. We just can go in the right direction.
Great advice.
So we have a tagline and stickers that says this, we have a lot of stickers. This journey is 1% finished. So we're just constantly always scaling and changing. But for me personally, I think working cross-functionally, especially what everybody in this room does, you know, and to a point that was made a few minutes ago about process versus tool, you have to have all that done. And if you're not talking to everybody cross-functionally, you're going to screw somebody else up. So to map that completely out and then work with your IT department on the tool side. And ours loves to write tools, and so all of our downstream tools are homegrown, but they have to know and they have to work alongside the business leads in order to be able to create one. So that's my takeaway.
I would say face the emotional landscape of change head on. The heart of change, the inspiration, the motivation, the empowerment. I have a good friend who's a junior partner at McKinsey & Company, and he and I are always talking about ideas back and forth. And he says, they're merchants of change at McKinsey, right? He says 9 times out of 10, successful change adoption is hindered because of motivation. So you can give people all the tools, the know-how, the training. If they're not in it with their hearts, then your change adoption is going to fail. So face that head on, leverage strategies and tools in your toolbox to face that emotional landscape and learn how to harness emotion, which is one of the very few infinite resources to really accelerate your change journeys.
Actually, I like to add a story from my work life. I used to work for a defense company, and the team that I was working together, I was forcing them to develop the processes and work with the processes. That they say, okay, it is slowing us. You know, the working with the process is slowing us. You know, we can make, it is stopping for the shortcuts. We need to have the shortcuts to do the job done. Then these people, they moved to Holland to work with ASML, and they are coming back. They say, oh, they do everything with the process. It's not slowing down. I said, there are reasons behind it. First, we couldn't give enough training to you. We couldn't educate you to understand that. We were just forcing you to work with the processes. But when you see in a different way, are we happy with the processes? They say yes. We are happy because it helps us to do our job without less mistake. But what we were using as the method was different than the ASML, and they are happy with the processes now. Then it means we have to change. We need to change to convince people. It is not only the people that are working with us, they need to change, we have to change too.
Very true. Claudia.
Sure. So my 2 pieces of advice. The first one is get your key stakeholders buy-in. And by that, I don't mean go and tell them what you want to do or what you think you should do, but is sitting one-on-one with them and identify what their vision and their strategy and their needs are, and then incorporate it into your initiative. And then the second one is find the influencers. Those are so key. If you find the influencers and convert them into your champions, it's a piece of cake. Now, the influencers are hidden everywhere. They are not always in the leadership. They are at any level. But they are the ones that the director or the VP will talk to. There will be the right hands. They will listen to them, right? And everybody else. So they are the leaders in the roles that you want to gain them over and be your champion to spread the change.
So I would like to build on what Cassandra was saying about emotions. Yes, change is a lot more mental than it is anything else. And it's really always amusing for me to see that the people that are resisting the most when it comes to changes in the workplace are the ones that are then standing by the water cooler and are discussing the latest feature of the latest truck that Ford brought out, right? And they cannot wait until they have those new features. However, that's their private life. So they are apparently in their private life very open to changes and new features, whereas on the job, not so much. So that's an experience that I have made. Then one thing that has not been mentioned a lot here in this panel was that the quality of the data by itself is already essential for success. If companies cannot manage the quality and integrity of their data, they should not even start the digital transformation journey, because it will end in a dead-end road, literally. You cannot be successful with dirty data. So that's also a piece of advice that I give in every single presentation that I have given of the last 5 years.
Well, great advice, great wisdom, and great insight. If you would help me in thanking our panelists and sharing that with us today. So that concludes our panel. I think I pass it over to our moderator to get us to our next session.